Okay, we'll call the committee of the whole meeting to order for June 28th at 12:30 p.m. And I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Cooey that the committee of the whole adopt the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting on June 28th, 2021 as presented.
I will give you that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
All in favor? Carried. Ask for a motion from Councillor Masterman, the committee of the whole adopt the minutes from the June 14th committee of the whole meeting as presented.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Good. All in favor? Carried. Business number 1, 4.1. Chris, return to council chamber.
Certainly, thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. This came up as a request from other members of council about a plan to return back to council chambers. We're in the process of getting everybody back to the office through a return to work program here, and part of that strategy is incorporating council as well. The challenge that we have with the council chambers is the technology continues to be a problem, and the hybrid option that we think is the best option that allow people to be on Zoom as well as in the room has significant issues with feedback within the room, and we're working with the county to resolve that. So we anticipate that hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, that we'll be seeing that resolved by early part of September at the latest. As we work through that, we're also talking with the county about some renovations that they would like to take place within the council chambers too, that they need to undertake over July and August. So those are kind of a couple of the complications. So those are the technical issues. And then it's up to council about their comfort level about coming back to the chambers and what that actually looks like. And working with the county, we need to also understand what that looks like for them. Does that require sneeze guards to be removed and dividers to be removed and replaced on a regular basis? And what their intent actually is. And we haven't really sat down with the county to this point yet and really talked about what they want to see happen. And they're on this kind of the same timeline of July and August status quo, and then we'll see what September brings. So I'll leave it at that. The technical issues are quite significant because I've been in that room when we've tried to do a hybrid kind of option, and the feedback has been horrendous. And we've had some issues from having to call people back on cell phones and then put cell phones up to mics so that they can manage that feedback issue. It's not an acoustically well-designed room. And so that's a little bit of the challenge, trying to retrofit something of this hybrid option. Unless we get rid of the hybrid option, close off Zoom and just go to live stream, which allows people to watch council meeting but not interact through Zoom or anything along those lines if they have to be there in person. That's one option that can accelerate that process. So it all depends on what council wants to see, how we want to move forward with the use of technology and integrate that into our future meetings, and whether or not we want to continue using technology within our future meetings as well. So I'll leave it there.
Councillor Moore.
I was just going to add, Chris, that the temporary meetings, like on virtual meetings, are only by a special order from the government of Alberta. They're only temporary, that we can continue with virtual meetings. Is that correct?
I'd have to go back and see when that order what that order actually says. No, I'm unmuted. Sorry. I thought I had muted myself. What that order actually says, we haven't heard if that will be rescinded yet. And the deputy minister has been good in communicating when those things have changed. And so we haven't seen anything from Paul Winnick in some time. We expect that they'll integrate this into the legislation to make this option as a permanent option moving forward. Because they've had great feedback about having this hybrid option available, and in some communities increasing participation in the democratic process. So we're hopeful that they'll keep that and integrate that into the legislation permanently, but we haven't seen when they plan to rescind that order on the temporary nature of the virtual meeting.
And then the other thing about that is that we could technically go back individually into council chambers and do it virtually from sitting in council chambers anytime we want.
That's correct. That's correct. We can have a closed, basically nobody but council and key members of staff within that room, and no public, and have a Zoom kind of meeting from that framework. Now, we do still have, I've been in a couple meetings previously that we have not solved the feedback issues, but sometimes we do still get some feedback issues on those, and the county's had some technology struggles as well that Ryan and I have been talking through and trying to sort that out. So it's not perfect. It'll never probably be perfect. And we'll do our best to move that forward. So the timing is certainly up to council, and we can accelerate that. And it depends on what kind of hybrid option council wants to see once everything opens back up. Whether it's coming back July 12th with the same way we did it with no live streaming, or do we wait until we get the technology updated and fixed and working appropriately for those hybrid options? So we'll leave that up to council.
And a further comment is that there's been quite a few businesses across Alberta that have already directed their employment resources that don't plan on coming back from working from home until September.
Yeah, we've heard that, and we've also heard that the province has been having meetings with their staff about arrangements to permanently have the majority of their staff provincially working from home in some kind of an arrangement. Not sure if that's full time or if that's based upon so many days a week. So we're seeing that. I know that staff, key members of staff that have been working with the province of Alberta have had those meetings already, and they're looking at different frameworks from an employment perspective for sure. So it will be a challenging process, and how we're designing our return to work is we're leaving it up to individual employees, especially in this office, what their comfort level is with masks, with social distancing, and what their gradual return to work will be it flip the switch January 2nd, July 2nd, or flipping the switch sometime later in the summer, and what that arrangement will be, and knowing that by Labor Day weekend that we want everybody back in the office, and then present council with a framework of what a future hybrid kind of employment arrangement may look like for staff members, and if there's any desire to explore that further. So
a lot of people are adamantly opposed to going back to the office. They want to continue working from home. Yeah,
that is a significant challenge right across the board, and both in the private and the public sector. That it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah. On the other hand, if I may make another comment, is that generally during the week we have 500 plus people converging on downtown for work in all of the respective business places, including the provincial building, the county offices, and the town offices. And it's good for economic development downtown to have these people actually working downtown. Mm-hmm. So it could be, if people aren't going to return to work, or we're not going to have a lot of people converging on the downtown, it could be a detrimental to our downtown area as well.
Yeah, that's certainly something to be aware of, Councillor Moore. And for small towns, it'll be even more of an effect, especially with the number of employees across the province that don't necessarily work in the same town or live in the same town that they reside, that there's certainly more attractiveness to coming up with alternative arrangements for flexible work weeks.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, and thank you very much, Chris. I think from my perspective, I had done a little bit of research speaking with members of like council from other municipalities who had been trying that in the early stages where they'd all be in the room distance, but still on their computers. I think that's kind of weird. And with you saying about the computer tech issues, because I think there's actually ironically more of a personal touch doing it this way if we're all doing virtual versus like we're in that room looking at our computers, but yet Kathy's 6 feet to my right or whatever. It just seems kind of strange. So I would actually opt for when we can actually meet entirely in person. But the one thing I do really hope does continue is the live stream though, because I've had tremendous feedback from the public that they've really enjoyed being able to watch the meetings at their leisure instead of having to take time off of work or whatever. So, and I think if the computer issues are going to be a distraction, then I don't think we'll be having effective meetings either. So I think that there's something to be considered about that, because if we're bothered by all of this feedback, we won't be focusing on the task at hand. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan.
Councillor Kinghorn?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Yeah, I think I'm a little confused here, and I'm not sure what you're saying. Is it just the Zoom part is what's giving us issue? If we want to do the live stream, we could have a typical debate as we've had in the past in chambers. We wouldn't be really looking at a computer or have anything to do with the computer. It's just something that's live streamed. Is that correct? The only issue is if we try to do a Zoom in the...
That's correct. If we try and do a hybrid meeting with petition delegation, for example, or input from the public outside of Zoom or a staff member from Zoom, we're having technical difficulties.
Yeah. So yeah, my only concern would be delegations, and if they're not comfortable coming into chambers and doing a presentation, it might create an issue. Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Kinghorn, we'll have some staff that will be hesitant as well to come in and present to council in council chambers for the short term. So we need to be cognizant of that too.
Councillor Cooey?
Thanks. I guess I'm kind of at the same mindset as Councillor McMillan that, and in particular, if our goal is to get staff back on some sort of regular basis, whether that's a hybrid or not, but if that means we're in chambers, then we're in chambers. I guess having the technology, if we've got a delegation that maybe isn't able to be there in person, I mean, I guess how much work do we put into the next 6 months versus the long term? I assume the long term is we get back to business as normal. Maybe it's not, and correct me if it's not, but to have those technical capabilities to do those other things, I think is an asset. Is it a must though to get us back into chambers and kind of working? I'm struggling with that a little bit, but if the goal is to get staff back in by September, then I think we should also be back in those chambers. I again agree that we need to continue to live stream. I would be really curious what the numbers have been, people engaging, if it's higher, and I assume it's higher than potentially when we are live. So I just think that's an option, but I assume our goal is to return to normal, and we need to start doing that, I think, in some phased approach. It's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Cooey.
Councillor Masterman?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So, Chris, I just had a quick question, and I believe you just said that the reluctance of the staff is shaping out to be a short-term issue. I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on how long
We're targeting September to have everybody back and comfortable and not hesitant to be here. And then talking with council about what flexible work arrangements could be accommodated within the office in the longer term. That's not necessarily due to COVID, but just as a new way of doing things. And what the ramifications are on that with a public facing organization like a local government. And so we need to have that conversation with council post COVID, because right now COVID is the main impact on how we're doing business. And if we want to even consider flexible work arrangements, which surveying our staff, we have heard that they would like to have some degree of flexibility in their work arrangements, structure of different hours of operation, those types of things. And so designing that system is going to take some time, and we need to have also the political support of council behind that when we are talking about a local government like the town of High River.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So it's probably illegal to ask people if they got vaccinated or not, but do we have a sense of how many people employed by the town of High River, what percentage are not being vaccinated?
So the second part of your question is no, I don't have a sense, unless people share their personal experiences. And the other part of the question is no, we can't ask.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Chris and I have talked about this a couple of times, and I'm absolutely not interested in going to any kind of hybrid model. I'm 100% with Carol on this, that, until the technical issues are fixed, I can't support being in and having a gong show like that in our council meetings. This works just fine. We've been doing great work with using Zoom and everything else, but I'm also not interested in going back in any matter into council chambers to appease some kind of political public option or optics. No interest in that. And as far as your vaccinations go, Bruce, that is what I'm watching. And the only thing we can go by is what's on the Alberta government website as far as the percentages of our community and of the province. And we're not there yet. July 1st, the only reason why all this stuff has been talked about is because our premier put a date on it, put a number on it, and he knew he was going to do whatever it took to make that number work. And he got that done so that we can have stampede and everything. It does not mean the pandemic's gone. It does not mean we're all good. It means they got enough flexibility that there's enough ICU beds available for us, right? So if you're choosing not to be vaccinated or whatever. So I'm watching the vaccination rates, not just for council, but for my personal life and also for my business. And I will be and have been already flat out asking people, are you vaccinated when you come through the doors of my business? It's up to them if they want to share it with me. If they don't want to share it with me, after July 1st, it's going to be put a mask on then. It's going to be, if you're double vaccinated, okay, I'll probably wear a mask even though I'm double vaccinated. I'll probably still wear a mask, be responsible on my end, but I've got no problem at all in asking people. The live streaming, absolutely. I think that's one thing that we just continue on for eternity, that we can do that. But a hybrid model, and well, let's go back to, there's the hybrid model that's just a no-go in my mind, because I think it's going to be very disruptive to a council meeting if we're running feedback, and it just would be embarrassing more than anything. We can get that figured out over time. What was my second one? Oh, sitting in front, all being in that room, sitting in front of our computers individually. No, I'm not going to do it. That's just weird. And yeah, I guess that's where I'm at. I'm far more comfortable. I even said to Chris, I said, let's just wait till after the election, next council, like talking September. Well, it's only another month till the next election's over and the next council can figure out what they're doing. But yeah, I want to see vaccination rates increased in this town and in the province. And, you know, we're starting to be a little more lenient to our parents and everything because they're all double vaxxed, but we make damn sure they're double vaxxed. So that's just kind of where I'm at. So I think we're doing just fine the way it is, and we can get some issues sorted out, but I do not see any rush in climbing back in there. So up against somebody else's sneeze guard. The other thing you got to remember is that we share those council chambers. It's not like other communities that have their own council chambers. We share that with a whole other municipality. So that has quite a bit different look on the whole COVID situation, right? So, you know, we're going to be patient in my mind. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to mention also that we've only got 5 more meetings in this term, regular council meetings. That is, so it would be probably better to leave it up to the next council to decide where they want to go and what they want to do.
Well, and then you got that much more time, and the vaccination rates will be that much higher and might even have hit herd immunity by then, right? So much different outlook on things. So we've been patient for this long. I think we just continue that road, and if we were missing something in our meetings that we had to get back into, yeah. And I think I'm you know, I do see things within this organization that are missing because people are not working in their offices. There's just no question. Working from home is much different than working together at the office. Much different. So I'll stop that one there because that's Chris Prosser's baby, not mine. So that's where we're at with that. Status quo until later on, Chris, till it comes up again. Okay. Annexation area, Khalid.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen here. Quick.
Khalid, continue on. I just got to run to the printer because I printed a bunch of this stuff off and I never went and grabbed it. I'll be right back. Continue on now.
Sounds good. Okay. Okay. So this is going to be a short presentation that really just to facilitate discussion with Council regarding the overall development within the annexation area. Riley also is here with me. He's also going to highlight some topics that around some of the proposed concepts, and so to help us all have the same understanding. This is just a quick outline. So we'll talk about, you know, the information that we shared with the property owners before the annexation, a couple of points about the annexation agreement, and then development prior to ASP, what does it look like? And then also the town plan review project, what does it mean to the process here? And then we have the proposed idea from the developer and the consultant. And then we will share the 3 concepts that were presented to the town previously, including the last one. So as council is aware, and based on previous council direction, we have met with all the property owners in November of 2017. In that meeting, we have absolutely shared with them all the information concerning the development of the annexation area A, whether it is an area structure plan, whether it is an outline plan, whether it is subdivision application, the required studies that should be completed, whether it is an area structure plan or the functional servicing report, and then the process that the town will follow in accepting or approving any application within that area. The engineering division also shared comprehensive information about the stormwater management, about the potable water, wastewater, and access as well, and that all linked to the infrastructure master plan that the town completed a few years ago, and also other studies that might be required, whether it is traffic impact assessment, whether it is environmental side assessment, whether it is geotechnical reports, and who is going to pay for those. That was all discussed in a very open way, and we have received 92% of support to the annexation process. Only one family objected to the proposed annexation. And even the support we've received based on the information we shared with them, that they've understood exactly what does it mean for the property to be annexed and whatnot. And so there shouldn't be any surprise for any property owner within that area when they hear us talking about the process that we have in place. In the annexation agreement, again, it was very clear that everything in the annexation area will be reviewed based on the county's land use bylaw. But the process, of course, will be based on the town process. Development will be based on the town standards. But the county's land use bylaw is the key document that will be followed in the review and approval of any application that come through. One important section I want to highlight in the annexation agreement is the one highlighted in yellow here. And this is just, it clearly tells us that lands may be redesignated to facilitate redevelopment or intensification of development only subsequent to appropriate planning supported by technical studies deemed suitable by the town, which will be completed at the cost of the landowners or proponents of development. So it's very clearly also captured in the annexation agreement that we both, the town and the county, and the owners were also involved in this, that any development of a technical study, whether it's an ASP or report, that would be at the cost of the owners. So there's nothing that also should be a surprise here to the property owners. Now, the applicant proposal, that's where we will focus our discussion. They have submitted 2 applications. And the 2 applications, they are basically rezoning applications, not subdivision application. But they have the intention that from rezoning, they will go to a subdivision. And so they have clearly indicated what does it mean, and they wanted us to support rezoning to employment service district, which is jumping the first rezoning process, which is urban reserve. Normally, when we annex lands, the town normally rezones the properties into urban reserve. And then from urban reserve, property owners will develop the required planning documents where it will help us facilitate rezoning and subdivision and then development. But at this stage, there isn't even urban reserve rezoning in place right now, and there is no planning documents to support any process, and yet they wanted to move from country residential properties to employment service district. Their proposed concept plan, it's a non-statutory document, which is non-binding on any person. It's a plan that the town moved away from it a long time ago because they don't really have any strong position that we can count on. It's something just high level that can help show or illustrate how the area might be developed, but it doesn't come with any strong mechanism that it can be implemented or it can be referenced because it's not by law. And council only accepted it and approved it by resolution, and it doesn't become by law at all. And also they have highlighted that the town's IMP, the infrastructure master plan and utility master plan, they are sufficient to provide services instead of completing the functional service report. And we know the infrastructure master plan, when it was completed, it was not completed for this area. It was for the overall town of High River within the boundaries, but also talked about extensions outside the town boundaries, but high level. There's no any detailed information about how the area can be accessed or serviced and whatnot. And those would need to be done in a detailed study for that specific area to make sure that it's clear and it is implementable. Also, the concept plan is being prepared based on the removal of the slip ramp. And we know the removal of slip ramp that's separate discussion that council need to have with the province, and we need to also have our planning exercise to ensure that when we remove the slip ramp, then we know exactly the implication and we have clear mitigations to any implications. This is here, it's a suggestion that this, and you could see it here on the concept plan that's right here, that this will come and connect with 24th Street, which is even traffic-wise, I'm not sure Riley will highlight on that, but it doesn't seems really done based on geometric and whatnot. Another point they have proposed, they are allowing access, each property will have access on 20th Street, which is again in conflict with the infrastructure master plan. The town's infrastructure master plan clearly prohibits and minimizes access into 20th Street. But they're proposing exactly the opposite of what the infrastructure master plan is proposing. And of course, the other guess is just the internal road system provides looping opportunities for deep utility infrastructure. That's just a common comment that they made. And I'm going to leave Riley here to take it from here for the next few slides, and then we can always talk about the other options. Riley.
Oops, wrong button. Turned my video off instead of unmuting. So thank you, Khalid. Just the one comment, you covered most of this, but the one comment in terms of the slip ramp, you are correct in terms of the geometry. A right angle at that south end there is not desirable, especially when the long-term distant plan is to eliminate that. It would be better straight on and then working the slip ramp in or out as the interchange upgrade proceeds. Next slide, please, Khalid. And so option one, this is just a commentary around temporary utilities. Temporary utilities are not desirable from a maintenance long-term basis. We're essentially looking at leapfrog development. And so how do we accommodate that? Who's responsible for that? They never function as well as intended. We had a bit of conversation around this for Spitzy area and some development over there. So I won't dwell on the details because this is more or less the same kind of idea. Next slide, please. Option two. I guess now we're talking about costs, about bringing in servicing. Interim servicing, leapfrog development, is that a cost or do we want to incur? Where does, from a storm perspective, where does that pond go? What happens to that land on an interim or permanent basis? Endeavors to make that sort of thing work are painful the best of days when you are trying to collect from future developers to pay for past developers. It's definitely not ideal. The other end is the offsite levies, which would need a full update, especially if the town was paying for that infrastructure and installing that infrastructure. There's also issues around adjacent landowners that would be impacted. So ultimately, if you were taking stormwater and sanitary sewer to Hampton Hills and using that lift station and that storm pond, there would have to be access agreements and pipes laid and a significant amount of work and cost that would have to be recouped through offsite levies or endeavors, depending on how that was structured. Next slide, please. This was just a concept. Christy had mentioned it in terms when she presented in terms of an existing document. It was basically just a concept of where a road may go and what zoning could be tied to that. Basically a conversation point. A lot more work would have to be done to develop it any further. Next slide, please. So we had and this goes back a couple of years, there was quite a bit of conversation around the slip ramp, whether it stays or goes, what's the status of it. At the same time, we were talking about the road network in that East Industrial, potential development in these acreage areas. And so there was a bit of a joint conversation between the town and the county, I think it was at IMC, in terms of what that might look like and how do we do that jointly together. There was talks at the time about doing a joint transportation plan for the area that's shown, as well as our East Industrial area, identifying some of the challenges we have with our own network and planning that comprehensively to give us an improved network. I guess to start that conversation, we had this done up as more or less a proof of concept. What could work, and what would that look like, and to be able to carry the conversation from that point. So this takes into account all our infrastructure master plan, our transportation master plan, a lot of those details, a lot of the future desires of the town, and considerations or restrictions that we would want addressed. For example, access restrictions or access control on 20th Street, so it doesn't get, constant intersections all the way down on something that's going to be fairly high volume. What does it look like when the slip ramp gets pulled out? What does the transition of land use look like? And so a lot of considerations. But again, it was at a high level, and there's a huge amount that it doesn't address. So for example, your FSR, or functional servicing study, would start going into pipe sizing, pipe grading, and then from there you could look at building elevations, building sizes, but that's also impacted by land use. Land use also impacts your road spacing. And so if there was a change to that, we'd probably have to update or adjust. Things like pedestrian planning weren't taken into account. Park space, even though there's a bit of park space, the planning on it wasn't done. So there's a huge amount of, it may look good at first glance, but there's a huge amount of work that's not there or not done to support this. This was basically a proof of concept to start a conversation. Given the conversation at the time, again, the potential of a joint study, the potential of the slip map removal, and the potential of the development conversations, and ensuring there was road right-of-way allowance accounted for within those developments. Khalid, next slide.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you, so Riley.
Thank you.
And so here, just a quick comments about the town plan. And as council is aware, the town plan project is around the corner here. It's going to be the kickoff meeting. It's going to be most probably in mid-July. And we know the town plan project is really the key document that bring forward the vision for the community. In addition to the council strategic plan that could be also prepared 2022. And the two documents will really help define the future of this community and how does it look like, and which will also help us to really define land uses within every undeveloped property. And that will basically lay the ground and the foundation for policy frameworks that will actually help council and administration to make informed decisions about proposed development in the future. And so right now, we have a process in place that trickles down from the town plan to rezonings, to subdivisions and development permit that always have to be in compliance with the overall vision that we have in our policy documents. And so based on that information, and when we have received the applications from the applicants, we've looked at the county's land use bylaw. And because the county's land use bylaw is the ruling document that for all developments proposed within the annexation area. And so section 13.1.6.1 says a person who wishes to subdivide land in this district into additional lots must first apply for and be granted approval of a land use bylaw amendment, which means they have to apply for rezoning first before they can go for subdivision and development permit. Now, based on the planning practices, when someone is allowed to rezone their property, they are given the go-ahead with development. Once you have rezoned your property, because rezoning has to come up with, approval of, in principle, what does that development look like and what does it? And so, even though that's what the bylaw says, we said we are prepared to put the rezoning process on the side, but we are willing to compromise the process and allow subdivision approval process to help facilitate change of ownership. That way, these property owners, they will be still in a position to subdivide the properties and maybe to sell a portion of it or to make different use of it, but yet they can still remain within the same area without any issues with the process. And that the compromise we have presented to them, they didn't say no, and they were not happy with it at the same time. But that was the, and even that compromise, it has to be based on council support, because administration does not have the authority to make any decision that goes maybe against the annexation agreement or doesn't get the support from the land use bylaw. So that's really where we are today. And so these are the strategic questions. I think council just need to look at them. The first one is, does council support administration proposed compromise to accept and approve subdivision applications in annexation area A to facilitate change of ownership? Does council wish to maintain the requirement for an ASP prior to rezoning and subdivision? Or if council wishes to maintain the requirements for comprehensive planning, does council wish to identify the planning and development of annexation area A as a priority for administration to facilitate through internal preparation of an ASP, or maintain the current position that this responsibility falls to the landowners and developers? These are that's concluded my presentation, Mr. Mayor, and we are happy to take any questions.
You and Riley love to put council in this position, don't you? Don't even dodge around it at all. This is sport for you guys.
Listen,
Okay. Go ahead, Kathy. I've got a question that I got to wrap my head around here first.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I have a few too that I'm kind of just running around, but there's a couple I just wanted to start with. So under the current status of these lands, let's say they want to develop, they want to add a new shop. Do I understand correctly that that question goes to the county under the current agreement?
It's a good question, Councilor Cooey. It doesn't go to there's nothing goes to the county. The county has no power over any development goals within the annexation area. The only power we get from the county is we are obligated to use the county's land use by law in reviewing and approving any application that comes through that area. So if a development would be approved under the county's land use by law, then we wouldn't have a problem. But we wanted to make sure that what we have shared with the owners way before the annexation was very clear process that before anything should go here, changing the character of the area, because we have to remember that any piecemeal development eventually will change the character of the area. And so we want to make sure that we have that comprehensive process done up front that fits with the overall vision of the community, that makes everybody win. Because if you allow someone to go today and somebody else next week, next month, in piecemeal, there will be a huge conflict of land use conflict in the area, and the community will lose, and we will end up paying for it. And so we wanted to really avoid that kind of situation by encouraging and make sure that the planning process done up front, and then people can go ahead and develop their properties. So that's really, and that's the main issue with the county. When they were in the county, the conflict between the town and the county and we agreed upon it at the end of the day, that we need to have a comprehensive planning for that area before we allow anything happen. And that what frustrated the owners, because the county was not prepared to work with the town to prepare the joint planning document to allow development happen there. And we both agreed without a planning process, without a planning document, supporting development within the area would be premature, and it will come and bite everybody.
Right, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, Khalid, that an ASP is essential. My understanding, and again, sorry, jumping around here, because I understand that there prior to annexation, a couple of the landowners had been given subdivisions and also permission to develop on those subdivisions. So I assume that we have to obviously allow that to occur because it was prior to annexation, correct?
Yes, that was way before annexation, yes. And in fact, whenever the county came up with a proposal, we've always made a position very clear that in the absence of the planning exercise that we agreed both on it, and it was documented in the IDP, we would not be in a position to support development. But the county at one point did undermine the town process and allowed a partial development to move forward.
Could there be, just throwing some ideas out, Spitzy Crossing? Obviously, there was an agreement between all of those landowners and those developers to go ahead. They were responsible for the ASP, and that follows our philosophy for growth, that growth falls on the landowner or the developer. But they established, and correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, they established an agreement where those landowners who were ready and prepared and wanted to get moving paid for those initial costs like the ASP, with an agreement when those other lands came to be developed, that then those previous developers that put up the money would be paid. Is that correct in my understanding how that agreement worked?
Yes.
So going forward, if this group of landowners said, we will pay for the ASP, we will set up a similar arrangement if there are those that do not want to participate at this point, what happens then?
This is a very complicated situation for sure, because the Spitzy owners, they paid all together for putting together the ASP.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody paid their portion for preparation of the ASP itself. That was out of the way. The issues among Spitzy owners is about who pays for the servicing. And that's where few owners came forward and suggested that we can take care of this. And even that hasn't been finalized yet. You know, and they're trying to put that, yes, and so they try to work with the town that in the future, if they put the services, owners who come late, they will pay for their portion as well to get the services. For these guys here, they have two situations. First one, to prepare the ASP. That's one step. And then, of course, the servicing study. The last step is who pays for the servicing that they needed, whether it's pipeline, whether it is lift station, whether it is, you know, everything they needed to service the land. Who pays for it? And that's also because we have very clear philosophy within the town plan and the growth management strategy that growth must pay for growth.
Yes.
And so by them trying right now to ask the town to lead an ASP process, it's going to be hugely costly on the ratepayers. But again, that's just a request they made. But if they are going to prepare an ASP, they need to talk to the neighbors, and they don't have to get a consent from every property owner to agree with the ASP. They don't have to. A single owner can go ahead with preparation of ASP and pay for it and do consultation, because it's, at the end of the day, it's a proposed land use concept for the future of that area. And so it's long term. It's not immediate development. It's long term. And so whoever interested, they can always be part of it. But when it comes to servicing, that's where the problem is. Who's going to pay for it and how endeavors can be collected? Because the town doesn't want to really be the banker, because it is very costly and very complicated.
Yeah. And I never wanted to suggest any of this was simple. So again, I'm just talking hypothetically. So let me just refer, just so I'm clear, the ASP from Spitzy, that group paid for it and they led it, correct?
They did hire the consultant. They have prepared it. They paid fully for it. We were just a prime stakeholder that we were
Which-
consulted throughout the process. Yes.
Which I believe that's the ideal scenario, correct?
Yes. Yes.
That
That's
it
right.
is led by the landowners, it's led by the developers. So again, hypothetical. They say, yes, we want this ASP to happen. They do it just in the model you've said. Could we then, or would we consider looking at that ISL concept plan with some restrictions? Let's say they need to be self-service. I know I couldn't read I didn't have enough time to read the full slide on the haul in, haul out, and I couldn't remember it from my reading. No new accesses. If there were certain things that fit within the ASP in this new plan, is that a possibility? I realize, and I appreciate and I'm fully behind the planning. I guess where I'm struggling a little bit is how long do we tie these landowners' hands? And how do we try to make some sort of smart balance in that? So just asking that question, if that's something that could be considered. And the issues you see, I guess, if we were to go down that road.
Yeah, I mean, and Riley can maybe even, because at the end of the day, I think the bigger piece, the planning piece, it's really much easier than the servicing piece.
Right.
Because the planning, it's the land use concept, that can be done much easier. When we come to the servicing study, that's where the problem kicks in, because it comes to the price. And
Right.
the price that comes with it, it's unknown unless they do the study, which will explain to them exactly how the area can be accessed, can be serviced, can be developed, and how much and who can pay for it. So that's unknown right now. But from our perspective, if they wanted to prepare the ASP, town administration is ready to collaborate with them and to support them in working on an ASP. That's for sure. That's our obligation, and we would not have any problem on that one. But the servicing piece, I would like to allow Riley to comment on it, because that's where the infrastructure master plan falls short. It doesn't give enough meat and potatoes for supporting development in that area. And for someone to jump and want to develop and change the character of the area without understanding how it can be serviced, it's problematic. It's going to be a legacy. So that's why I think, Riley, what do you think about Councillor Ku's comment about the servicing piece?
I would agree with you, Khalid. You would typically do your servicing report with your ASP anyway. So as long as they're doing both hand in hand, I wouldn't see an issue, and we could then proceed from there. There is, I guess, the FSR would have to deal with a couple things. And so first off is, how do you actually service the parcel? When you start putting mains in the road, how big are they? Does that restrict grades on your buildings, as an example? Can you have basements? Is this slab on grade? Those kind of things. How big? What does the storm pond expansion look like? Now you're starting to get into, they call it a stormwater master plan. So where does that stormwater go? What does it look like? How big of an expansion on Hampton Hill Storm Pond to the north do we go? What about the landowner agreements? Who pays for that? That's an offsite cost. So are we going to put that in offsite levies or not? Or are we going to put that onto the developers with some sort of endeavor process? Similar with the lift station. Like there's a lot of downstream impacts from servicing this that we don't have an understanding of yet. The infrastructure master plan did some high level concepts that said, it basically took it far enough along that said, conceptually, yeah, we can service this, so we can annex it. Now we have to do the detail work behind that and figure out how it actually works.
So one more question, Riley, and then I'll let Dawn have a go at it. if this group, whoever that is, 2 or 5 or all 11 of them, say, we're ready to go, we're going to do an ASB, we're going to do the infrastructure plan, we're going to do all of that, they can fill their boots. That will, and more importantly, does that compare to the same as, and I'm going to use Spitzy just because it's the most current, that's exactly the process that they've had to go through as well, correct? They are responsible for the ASP. They were responsible for the infrastructure planning. Is that
Correct. That is correct.
so? In that case, we're moving ahead fairly from one development to another development. We're allowing them to move forward. We're continuing with our philosophy of growth, pays for growth, and allows them the opportunity to move forward. Do I have that summed up?
Yes. Yes. The town's involved in that, like Colette said, in terms of being involved in reviews, we are the ultimate approving authority. There would have to be some sort of update on our end when you start looking, for example, offsite levies would need probably a fairly significant update as a result of the work they do. We would take their work, integrate it into ours, and then do updates. And then council would have to, and I guess that's a large part of why we're here today. Council would have to evaluate doing this in advance of the town plan. And is the town plan going to have a significant change in terms of what council wants the community to look like?
Okay, thanks, Riley. I'm done for a minute.
Sorry, we weren't exactly answering you directly, Councillor Cooey. We talked lots about process and didn't give you a direct answer on some of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things, it might be the way we're talking about this, it may come across that we're not open for any solutions. I think from my perspective, if there's any solution or a middle ground solution that could work for the developers and the town, I think the criteria for our end is that it shouldn't really create a legacy in the future. It shouldn't be costly to the town. It should be something that can be in the interim, but that can be for ultimate, just work fine. And so that's really, I think, the obligation falls on the developers to come up with such a solution. From our end, we have a process, and that process council had the authority to tweak, to change, to make any suggestions. We can always work with council interest and whatnot. But I think the developer at this point and the applicant, what they proposed to have a non-binding document for developing a major area like that, it's going to be very slippery slip. Like it's just going to be risky, and risky for the town from financial perspective, risk for the town from a legal perspective. And we know that they have to also do their part to really have their conversation with the neighbors. Right now, I've seen some emails here and there, but it's only led by 1 or 2 interested developers. Others, they wanted to stay there. They wanted their residential development to stay there forever. They don't have a problem. But they need to bring them on board to make sure that they all understand how that area will be evolved and developed. But if you want to just develop one piece of the puzzle, and that's council decision as well, we can absolutely let go and we allow them to develop that area. But it's going to be very different, and it will not help rectify the land use conflict within that whole corridor. It will make it more difficult and just bring more issues and challenges, and it will just become a legacy for us. And we wanted to really just reverse the course in that area. So we're not against it in principle. It's just about how can we make sure that it fits with the town vision.
Well, and I think we've been through that in this town more than enough, Khalid, that we know we know how long lasting the impacts are come to be when any municipality does that, right? So exists in High River, it exists pretty much everywhere. So I'll go to Councillor Moore next, please.
Thank you. I was just trying to figure out a cost here of an ASP. I know that previously, a few years ago, we had no problems with things because generally there was one landowner and he would sell the land to a developer. And the developer was responsible for getting an ASP put into place for the type of development that he wanted. And then we came to the Spitzy Crossing and this annexation area A, where we've got multiple landowners. And that makes a lot bigger problem than just dealing with one. The other thing is that developers now are insisting that the landowners do their own ASP, and they can come in like a kind of a turnkey operation and do the development and not have to be involved in the years and cost of developing an ASP. So that's what happened with Spitzy Crossing, is that there was no developer that wanted to come in and do it if there was an ASP in place. So then when you got all of the landowners together, they all of a sudden says, well, we just thought that by going together in this group that we would sell our land to a developer and they would take it from there. But when they heard that, oh, we have to share the costs of making an ASP and service and studies, etc., for this area, and we're not in anymore on this. So in Spitzy Crossings, there's only half of the landowners that actually put money into developing the ASP. And I think that the cost for that development was over a period of about 3 or 4 years was around $400,000 for fees just to develop the ASP. So I'm looking at annexation area A and saying when the people, each individual landowner there starts realizing what the actual cost is going to be to develop an ASP, that some of them are going to say, I'm not in on this. I was okay with the annexation into the town, but I'm not in on developing an ASP because I'm quite happy with what I've got now and where I am, and I have no future plans for any development or anything. So you're going to end up again where 2 or 3 or 4 are going to pay the entire costs of the ASP. And they may become the developer as well, but it's going to cost in, I would say, in that area of $300,000, $400,000 just for the studies and the fees. Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct, Councillor Moore. Preparation of ASP in the hundreds of thousands, 150,000 to 200,000 for sure. And the functional services report, the same thing, within around $100,000. And they may need also a traffic impact assessment, environmental site assessment, geotechnical report. So it is in that neighborhood, yes.
Yeah, and part of that cost could be on town staff, but do we want to expend that at the detriment of other projects and time-consuming efforts that we have? So it would basically be, if the landowners want to develop, and the process actually takes process. It can take 2 or 3 years. So I think that's the question that the landowners have to answer in getting an ASP. And I think it's just totally pure folly to develop individual portions without an ASP.
I think that's bang on. I don't know that my experience with this council, I don't know that anybody would be interested in individual developments in this area. That's a rabbit hole you'll never crawl out of. You know, can we find compromise? Can we find balance? Yeah, we'll continue to work on that, but individually, no. Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. From my perspective, I think it's really clear. Khalid has been very, very clear in that we are being fair and we're treating all developers and areas the same. We're not doing anything special for one group or another group. This isn't a penalty. It isn't something that came out of the blue all of a sudden. It's been there since prior to the annexation. And I support what Khalid and his department are doing. It needs an ASP. It needs to be paid for by the owners out there, whether it be one owner doesn't pay for the whole ASP or all 8 or 10 of them. Regardless, an ASP needs to be in place before we can move on. And Khalid and Riley, I want to thank you guys for your efforts in this, and you've put in a lot of work on this, and I think you've done a very, very good job on behalf of the town and its ratepayers. Thank you.
Khalid, can you bring up your 1, 2, 3 options for council? Okay, so your number 1 is the one that, if I can understand, Khalid, that number 1 is what you are recommending that we could do. I can't hear you if you're talking.
And then I will share.
So your number one option, Khalid, are we? So does council support administration's proposed compromise to accept and approve subdivision applications in annexation area A to facilitate change of ownership only prior to comprehensive planning being in place? So I guess my first question on that one is, why change of ownership only? Why limited to that? Like if an owner just wanted to subdivide for, well, I know Mr. Langford is wanting to subdivide, I think, in the 3 parcels to separate 3 different business entities that are all kind of jumbled into one right now. So it's not change of ownership, but I guess it could be on a piece of paper to different business entities, right? So does that still fit? Like if Jeff wanted to say, okay, I've got my house on this subdivision is my house and it's under Jeff Langford, and then this piece is under, well, his Sierra Group, and then another piece is under a different company, 2 different business entities and his personal property. Does that fall into the change of ownership only category?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The proposed recommendation, actually, it is inclusive. It's better, it's bigger. It allows them, because if you're changing, you're just subdividing for your own use. That's just, it's guaranteed already.
Okay.
This is bigger than just you subdividing for yourself. If you want to sell even a portion of it, that's fine too. So we're
Okay.
giving them more opportunity actually.
Yeah, I know there's one other out there that's had opportunities to sell
That's right.
his business entity of it, but wants to keep his house, of course,
That's right.
like somewhere to live while he's. So that those would fall into that. So you are comfortable enough, Khalid, that you've got enough information that we would be able to do these subdivisions. But anything further than a subdivision requires the ASP. Is that what I'm understanding clearly?
That's right. And that's how we will make sure that the transmittal of decision will include some conditions that clearly define what the approval is all for.
Okay. Okay. Okay, can you stop sharing so I can see all the council, please? Okay, so no resolution or anything, just direction for administration. Is council okay with proceeding in that direction? With that option number one? Okay. Okay, so proceed on your recommendation, Khalid. And you know, definitely, I know you will, but just so you hear it from us, to keep us up to speed on how that's proceeding. And I don't know. Yeah, and I think we got to be clear back to those owners as far as this ASP goes and any development, you need to really start looking at that and the costs associated and talking with the rest of the landowners to get that moving forward. Now, Councillor Cooey, I know you and I have been in direct conversations with the same landowner. Do you think this meets Mr. Langford's needs and protects the town?
I think based on a conversation with one of the other landowners today that I believe, if I understood correctly, that they've kind of realized that the ASP is going to be on them. I think now understanding how the town is involved in that we don't lead ASPs. I know in talking to some of them, you know, kind of the feeling has been because there's a major road going through it that maybe the town should be taking some of that on. I've pointed out that there's a major road going through Spitzy Crossing as well, major thoroughfare, and again, everything was on the landowners. So I hope it's a meet in the middle. Probably not exactly what they'd come to the table hoping for, but I think it's a path forward. And I think based on what we do with other developments, it's a fair way forward, and also for the existing taxpayers, it's a fair way forward and it sticks with our philosophy. So I'm hopeful that that this meets some of their needs. I guess we're probably going to find out really quickly.
Yeah, and you know, going back, I think it was all spelled out very clearly in the original annexation agreement as to where this is headed. So I feel this is a compromise for you know, a small portion of what's required, and you know, thanks to Khalid and Riley for, you know, figuring this out. But you know, move forward on that, Khalid.
Yeah. So just a final comment, just so councilors are aware, we have not at this point received any subdivision applications. What we have received was a rezoning application, and that rezone application hasn't been processed because it doesn't meet the regulations and the town standards.
And a rezoning application needs an ASP, correct?
That's right.
Right. So, okay. Well, you get back to the landowners with what we've discussed today, Khalid, and we'll move forward on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Okay. Question and answer period. Anything? We are at 1:45 p.m. So, I don't know, 15 minutes, and we could have an hour break for between meetings. Councilor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Just a quick question to Chris. We still have the river monitoring signs up in place along Center Street, talking about the river levels. Is the plan to keep those up for a while longer, or are we just about time where we can take them down? From my perspective, we're past the flood season, and it's just, again, another reminder that we just don't need. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Kinghorn. Last year, we took them down just shortly after the July long weekend. So I think provided everything stays the way it is and the hot weather looks like it's here for the next 3 weeks, they'll be coming down after post Canada Day. And we do have a special as well, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Thanks, buddy. Councilor
Just don't
Moore.
get everybody's hopes that they got an hour break before council.
I knew there was something else.
I just have a quick question. I got a call from a resident of Polo Park that looks out over the new cross area, BJ's land. There's a real messy area right in front of the building that has like 3 foot tall dried out grass, etc. Used to have horses in there that were grazing and stuff, but this person is wondering, since this is now town property and it is totally different than all of the other properties along a Longview Trail there, is there anything that we can do as far as unsightly properties?
I can't answer that right now, Councilor Moore. I'll have to get back to you on that one. And we'll talk about it at our debriefing session tomorrow morning.
Okay, I know it's farmland kind of thing idea, but I drove by and it does look pretty messy compared to all of the other properties along there. So.
Okay.
There's another little issue right at the corner of Longview Trail and 7th Street. We still have the town limit sign up there that's been there for years. And I think it conveys the wrong message as far as signage and everything else,
Okay.
where people are allowed to do things. So if we could pull that sign out one day, that would be nice.
Should be easy. It's not in the ground very far.
Pardon?
It's not in the ground very far.
It's come up every year for 8 years, so.
We'll get that out of there.
Okay, all good. We got another meeting, so no more questions. Meeting adjourned, 1:48 p.m. Thank you.